Cal Renner hated this station. The walls smelled like oil and burnt metal. The air was thick with smoke from cheap food stands and the stink of drunk mercenaries. He had only come here to fix a cargo ship and leave, but nothing went right since. He arrived. He walked through the lower deck, holding a tool case in one hand and rubbing his tired eyes with the other. He had just finished 12 hours of work on a broken plasma coil. Now all he wanted was food and sleep. As he turned the corner, near Base 6, 3 figures stepped in front of him, marks, all wearing mismatched armor and half-melted face shields. The one in the middle had a broken nose and a grin that said, "Trouble, you dropped something." Engineerkel stopped. "No, I didn't." One with the broken nose stepped closer. "You sure about that?" Before Cal could answer, a punch landed in his gut. He dropped the tool case and fell to one knee. His breath vanished. Another merc kicked him in the side. His body hit the metal wall. They laughed. Just a little. Funoni of them reached for Cal's wrist, then everything went darnot from pain from something massive dropping behind them. Floor shook. The lights above flickered. A tall shadow stood in the smoke, taller than any human. Her skin was a deep gray blue. Her eyes burned with a silver glow. She did not speak. She just moved fast. One of the marks tried to pull his weapon, but she had already reached him. Her hand wrapped around his throat and slammed him into the wall. The other backed away. She stared at them. Her growl rumbled through the hallway. They dropped their weapons and ran. Tall alien turned to Cal. He expected more violence, maybe a threat, but she only tilted her head. Cal coughed and stood up slowly. "Thanks, I guess," said nothing. There was silence between them, not awkward, just strange. Cal looked at her face. Strong jaw, strange armor made of something alive. Her hair was braided in tight ropes down her back. She looked like a soldier from a dream. He didn't know what else to do, so he reached out and gently patted her head. It was awkward. A quick thank you gesture, like patting a dog after it saves you. She didn't react at first. Then she made a low sound in her throat, not anger, not pain, a soft growl. She stepped back and vanished into the shadow. Cal blinked, then looked around. No one else was there. He shook his head and picked up his tools. That was weird. He walked back to his quarters and tried to forget about it. Next day started like normal. He went to the engine bay, ran diagnostics, helped another tech replace a burned-out coolant line, but something felt a fevery time. He turned a corner. He felt watched in the mess hall. A crew member named Joran walked up to him and clapped a hand on his back. "Cal, you still owe me for that bet." Before Cal could answer, a deep growl filled the room. Ryan turned. Standing by the door was the same alien woman. Her eyes locked on Joran's hand. Joran froze, slowly stepped back. The growl faded. Stared at Cal, then walked out. People began whispering. Someone asked who she was. Another joked about Cal hiring a bodyguard, but Cal was not laughing, didn't even know her name. Later that night, she waited outside his quarters. Said nothing, just stood there. He stepped outside and crossed his arms. "Are you following?" Mestel silence. Side look. "I appreciate the help, really, but I don't know who you are or what you want." Her voice came at last, soft, deep, clear. Kayla waited for more, but that was all she said. Then she turned and walked away. Again, Cal couldn't sleep that night. This mind kept going back to her ice. The way she moved, the way she reacted to that simple touch. It was just a pat, nothing more, but something had changed in her after that, and now she growled at anyone else who touched him. She was not just some lost alien. Something ancient lived behind those ice, and whatever it wasted had chosen him. Cal tried to go back to normal. He went to work, ran his checklists, ate in the mess hall, tried not to notice the looks people gave him, but Kelly never left. She didn't speak unless she had to. She didn't ask questions. She didn't explain herself, but she was always there. If Cal was in the engine room, she stood outside the hatch. If he was on break, she waited at the table across the hall. If someone reached for him, even by accident, she growled low and deep like thunder rolling under steel. No one touched him anymore. One day, his supervisor tried to pull him aside for a private chat. The moment the man's hand touched Cal's shoulder, Kelly stepped between them like a wall, her eyes locked on the supervisor. The growl started in her chest and shook the floor. The man backed off with hands raised. Cal had to step in just to calm her down. After that, no one got near. Some of the crew started whispering that she was his bodyguard. Others said she was some kind of alien pet. A few said nothing at all, because they were too afraid, but Cal knew better. Kelly was not protecting him because someone hired her. She was doing it by choice, and that scared him more than anything. Sat in his bunk late one night, staring at a photo of his old crew friends from Earth, people who never needed protection. Oh, he couldn't go anywhere without a silent shadow trailing behind him. Opened a data tablet and searched for information. He typed in the word she had said to him, Kelly. At first, nothing came up, but deep in old files, buried in forgotten records, he found something, a race called the Nyari. Not much was known about them, just faded reports from long ago, descriptions of tall warriors, glowing eyes, braided hair, strange armor. They didn't speak much, but they bonded, not just emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And once that bond began, it was for Verkal read more. The Nyari were believed to be extinct, wiped out during a war. No one remembered clearly. There were no confirmed sightings in over 100 years. So how was one standing right outside his door? Looked up, and there she was. Never knocked, never needed to. Kaylee stepped into the room. Kel didn't ask how she got past the lock. He put the tablet away and Studi need answer. She nodded once. You touch may know, but it was just a pat. Oh, your kind, yes to mine. It begins the bond. Cal stepped back. What does that mean? Why? Kaylee looked at him for a long time before answering. Becca's, you didn't flinch because your touch was not fear, because my kind. Remember, your kind, even if you forgot. Yuskal sat down slowly. That doesn't make sense. We don't even know each other. Kaylee knelt in front of him, her voice softer now. Wilkal stared into her eyes, the silver glow. There wasn't just light, it was memory. And something. Marie didn't feel threatened. He felt seen, but he still had questions. If this is a bond, what happens? No. Kaylee stood and looked out the window. No. I stay until you are safe, until the bond is full. Leaned forward, and then Kelly looked back. Then you will see who you really are. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to say this was crazy, but deep down, something inside him believed her. Later that night, he dreamed of a place he had never seen, a field of ash under a green sky. He stood beside her in armor that did not belong to him. Her hand rested on his shoulder, and fire rained from the stars above. When he woke up, she was still standing in the corner of his room, watching, waiting, protecting. Something had started, something ancient, and it would not stop. Cal stood on the upper deck of Docking Bay 3, watching a ship land that wasn't supposed to be there. It had no markings, no registry, no official clearance. Sight hovered too long before settling down. Its hull was too clean, its lights didn't blink like standard vessels. Everything about it felt wrong. Kaylee stood beside him without saying a word. She had been quiet for hours, more than usual. Her posture was stiff, her eyes locked on the ship, like it was something she had seen before, something she had fought before. Kel turned to Harry. You know them? Kelly didn't blink. He know what they followed. The ramp opened. 3 figures stepped out, humanoid, covered in gray armor. Their faces were hidden under masks. With glowing red eyes, they moved slowly, each step exact. 2 exact. Kel's wrist calm boot said a message had arrived. No sender, no encryption, just a single line. Do not let them see her. His hands went cold. Looked up. The masked figures were scanning the bay, not with devices, with their eyes that seemed to see through walls. Scaly stepped in front of him. Slight. Kel moved back without thinking. Her presence had become instinct now. His shield on. Of the masked figures turned their head toward them, paused, then walked away. The others followed. They didn't ask for docking codes. They didn't speak to command. They just walked through the station like they were looking for something lost. Kel pulled Kelly into a side corridor. Who are they? She looked around before answering. Hunters. They don't speak because their minds are connected. They don't see with eyes. They feel the code inside me. And now inside you. Kel stepped back. Wait. Ely nodded. Once when you touched me, you accepted more than a bond. Part of the old code is now inside your body. It has started waking up. Cal didn't know what to say. He felt fine, but maybe that was the problem. Remembered the dream, the armor, the battlefield. The firelight didn't feel like imagination. It felt like memory. Kaylee placed a hand on his chest. The can feel it to now. The bond marked you. You're not invisible anymore. Kel stepped away and leaned against the wall. So what do? We can't fight them. We don't even know how many there are. Kaylee's expression didn't change. Run not far, but somewhere. The code can finish. Waking up. Once it does, you'll know what to do. Kel shook his head. This wasn't his life. He fixed engines, cleaned filters, wrote reports. He wasn't supposed to be in the middle of an ancient war. Looked up at her. Me. Why not someone stronger, someone trainer? Kelly answered without hesitation. Becca's, you didn't hesitate when I needed safety. You gave it freely. That is the rarest strength. Cole took a breath, then another outside the window. The masked figures walked past slowly. Kelly turned and moved down the corridor. Cal followed. They reached the docking ring. An old freighter was there, rusty small, almost forgotten. Kelly entered the access code. Without looking, how do you know the ship? You've used it before. Cole stepped inside. The lights flickered to life. They didn't bring anything. They didn't need tows. The ship detached from the station. Kelly stood by the window. Her eyes watched the stars. But her mind was somewhere else. Cole sat in the pilot chair. He had no training for this. But his hands moved like they remembered something he didn't. The ship responded smoothly like it knew him. Kelly looked at him. From across the room, the Bond is waking up. Cal didn't answer, didn't have to, because deep inside his chest, something old, something buried, had begun to open its eyes. The freighter drifted through a dark part of space. No beacons, no traffic lanes, no signals from any nearby system. It was the kind of space where things disappeared. Cole sat in the cockpit, his hands still resting on the controls. He hadn't touched them in minutes. The ship was flying itself, or maybe something inside him was guiding it. Kelly stood at the back of the cockpit, watching the stars, silent as always. But her shoulders were tense, her breathing low and steady, like she was waiting for something to break. Cole turned his head slightly. Where are we going? Kelly stepped forward. Somewhere quiet, somewhere the code can finish waking up. Cal looked down at his wrist. The screen flashed strange symbols, nothing like he had ever seen. They weren't just alien, they were moving, changing as he watched, like they were alive. Suddenly, the ship jolted. A small tremor, then a quiet voice came through the system. Warning. Unstable energy detected in user neural link. Cole's vision blurred for a moment, not from pain, from memory. He saw a temple built inside a mountain. He saw Kelly, younger, standing in front of a circle of fire. He saw a symbol carved into stone, and touching another A. Bond being Medivh blinked and grabbed the edge of the console. Kelly moved quickly to his side. Her hand rested against his back. You felt. Cole nodded slowly. It's like something is watching me from inside my own mind. Shh. Looked at the screen. It's not watching, it's remembering. She placed a small stone on the control panel. It glowed faint blue. This is a trigger crystal. It was made to wake the code only if the Bond was strong enough. Until now, no one had survived long enough to activate it. Cole stared at it. What happens if we use it? Kelly met his eyes. The code will finish waking. You'll see what it really is and what it's hiding from. Cole reached forward. His fingers touched the crystal. A warm pulse ran through his skin. The ship shut down for 1 second. No lights, no sound. Then everything returned, but changed. The walls of the cockpit glowed softly. Symbols appeared on every surface. Even the air shimmered slightly. Kelly stepped back and watched him. Cole stood slowly. His body felt different. He could hear something in the walls, not noise, a kind of heartbeat. Then the screen flashed again. Code accepted. Host recognized. War protocol unlocked. A hidden panel opened beside him. Inside was a folded piece of armor, dark silver, covered in the same moving symbol. Skull didn't move. This is from your people. Kelly shook her head. No, that is from yours. The first ones, the ones who bonded with us before the war. Cal touched the armor. It was warm. It pulsed with the same rhythm as his chest. He turned to her. What did they do? Why was this hidden? Kelly walked closer. They created the bond to bring peace, to connect minds without fear. But when fear returned, the bond became a weapon. Oh, it sleeps inside those who carry it, waiting to wake when danger comes again. Cole looked down at the armor in his hands. It didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a part of him waiting. Suddenly, the ship's alarm rang. Incoming craft. One signature unmarked. Speed increasing. Kelly moved to the window. They found Yuskal. Stepped into the armor. It wrapped around his body like it had been built for him. It tightened once, then settled. The cockpit lights dimmed again. Unknown pilot signal detected. Engaging defensive bond. Reflexcal felt a shift in his mind. The ship responded to his thoughts. He didn't have to move. He only had to want it. Kelly looked at him with something close to predator. Remembering faster than I expected. Cole looked at the screen. The enemy ship was close to close-bit. He wasn't afraid. Wasn't the Samoth. Bond had changed him. The code had chosen him, and now he was ready to fight. The enemy ship fired first. Bright plasma ripped across the black sky. Cal didn't flinch. He raised his hand and thought of a shield. The freighter's front hull shimmered blue. The shot hit, but it didn't break. Throth armor he wore glowed with moving symbols. It responded to every command he made. Not with buttons, with thought. Kelly stood behind him, her eyes locked on the enemy signature. No fear, just focus. They are testing you. Cole kept his hand steady. They'll find out soon. I'm Not here to be tested. Freighter banked hard to the right. Kel didn't move the controls. The ship followed his mind. His focus brought up a map. Dead sectors ahead, empty systems. Graveyards of forgotten war. Scaly stepped beside him. Take us through. Sector 3, there's a trail they won't expect. Nodded. The ship dove into a narrow rift. Between two asteroids, metal scraped the side. Alarms blinked. He silenced them with a single thought. The enemy ship followed, faster, sharper, like a predator. Smelling blood, Kaylee moved to the rear bay and opened a hidden compartment. Inside were weapons, not human, not Nyari. Something older. She picked a pair of bladed gauntlets and tossed a small device to Cal. What's this? Answered without looking. Trigger mine. Throw it when they get close. Cal ran to the airlock. Opened the external bay. Wind roared inside. Stars flashed in his eyes. He saw the shadow of the enemy ship closing in fast to fast. He threw the mine. It spun once, twice, then latched onto their hull. A flash, no sound, just light. The enemy ship tilted. Smoke poured from the sidicle. Slammed the bay shut and ran back to the cockpit. Kelly watched the radar. They are damaged, but not Gonical. Looked ahead. A strange cloud waited at the edge of the sector. It pulsed with soft green light. What's that? Kelly narrowed her eyes. A breach field made from the leftovers of collapsed space. It's unstable. Didn't blink. In we go through it. We can. If you trust your bond. Didn't answer. He pushed the ship forward. The clouds swallowed them. Colors bled into each other. Time bent slightly. The stars moved in wrong directions. Skull closed. His eyes focused on Kelly, on the bond, on the feeling in his chest that had become more than memorized. Ship followed his thoughts, his will, not the laws of physics. They passed through on the other side. Silence. ETH radar showed no sign of the enemy. Kaylee Exaledu guided the breach. Without training, sat back. Mabe, I've done this before in another life. Kaylee nodded slowly. The code doesn't just wake, it remembers its last host. You're not just linked. You're becoming the last carrier. Turned to face her. What does that mean? It means you will carry the full memory of the bond and what broke. I've looked away out the window. They were flying over a field of broken stations. Wreckage from old battles, burned ships floating in silence. Kelly placed her hand on his shoulder. Are getting close to Wado, where it ended and where it can begin. Again, suddenly the radar blinked, multiple signals dormant, but not dead. Kaylee's voice dropped at the grave of the old warriors. They're waking up. Cal stood slowly. The armor around his body hummed. The ship slowed, as if sensing what lay ahead below them. A ring of ancient towers lit up, one by one, welcoming him. The enemy would come again. That much was certain, but this time he wasn't just running, was remembering. He was becoming again Kelly. She was no longer just protecting him, she was preparing him for the truth, for the war, for what was waiting under the surface of this forgotten world. The ship touched down in complete silence. No welcome signal, no sound from the towers. Only a low hum coming from deep under the ground. Cal stepped off the ramp and felt the change in the air. It was heavy, but not with gravity. It was thick with memory. Kaylee walked beside him. Her eyes were fixed on the giant structure ahead. A black stone temple with tall spires that reached into the clouds. Symbols moved across the walls, like they were alive, the same symbols that now glowed faintly across Cal's armor. Stepped closer. The ground beneath his feet lit up. The doors of the temple opened slowly. Not from a system, from recognition. At nose. Kaylee nodded. It's been waiting for you. They entered the temple. Inside was a massive circular chamber. In the center floated a ring of light, and beneath it, a chair made of pure white crystal. Kelly stepped back, her voice quiet. Now that is the bonding seat, the place where the original link was made between our kinds. No one has used it since the war. Cal walked toward it. He didn't feel fear, he felt drawn to it, like something inside him was pulling him forward. Turned to Kaylee. What happens if I sigh? Their eyes did not leave his face. The bond becomes permanent. Your mind will open to all who carried it before you. Will see their victories, their failures, their truths, and their Leaskell. Look at the seat. The ring above it pulsed with slow light. Wet. If I can't handle Ethan, it will break you, and you will forget who you are. He stood in silence, then sat down. The moment his body touched the crystal, the light changed. The ring began to spin, slow at first, then faster. Closed his eyes. A rush of visions hit him. Saw the first humans who made the bond, engineers and warriors standing with Nyari soldiers, their minds linked, their thoughts shared. No secrets, no commands, just connection. Then came the fear. The first time a bonded warrior lost control, the humans tried to separate the link, tried to shut down what they couldn't understand. War began not because of hatred, but because of fear. Saw Kaylee's ancestors hiding in broken ships, sleeping in caves, passing down fragments of the code, waiting for someone brave enough to touch the bond again, saw himself not as Cal but as part of something much larger. A vessel carrying the last piece of a forgotten pieceth chair pulsed once more. Then fatted hope in his eyes. His body was the same, but he wasn't. Kelly stepped forward. She could see it, feel it. The change was completical. Stood slowly. It's Donna. Kelly placed a hand over his heart. You are the last protocol. The code now lives fully inside you. It will not pass again. He looked at her. Because you didn't try to control it. You accepted it even when you didn't understand. Suddenly, a tremor shook the temple. Dust fell from the ceiling. Kelly's eyes went sharp. The enemy ship had found them. More were coming, dozens, maybe hundreds. Skull didn't move. He stepped outside, raised his hand toward the sky. A symbol formed in the air. Bright and glowing towers around the temple responded, each one sending out a wave of light. The sky cracked. A signal burst out across space, a warning and a call, not for war, but for remembrance. Ships began to shift in the distance. Enemy vessels hesitated. He felt it, the presence. The Coda. Kaylee stood beside him. They will not attack, not yet. They're waiting to see what you. Dokul stared into the sky. Then let them see. Closed his eyes and released the full memory of the bond, the history, the truth, the original purpose. It spread across space like fire. Through dry earth, bond had returned, not as a weapon, but as a choice. Those who feared it would soon have to Dokul turned to Kelly. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a chosen one. Was something older, something deeper. Was the key that had never been lost, just waiting to be remembered. The light from the towers faded into the sky like smoke into wind. Silence followed. Not the silence of fear, but the silence that comes just before change. Go stood still on the platform outside the temple. His armor no longer glowed, but the feeling inside him hadn't faded. It had grown, it had matured. Kaylee stood beside him. She no longer looked like a guardian. She looked like something more, not just a protector, not just a warrior. She looked like someone who had found what she waited for her whole life, far above them. The enemy ships remained in orbit. They did not fire, they did not move. They just watched. Kul knew they were waiting to see what he would become. Kelly spoke first. Signal reached deep, even into systems that were closed for generations. Kul nodded slowly. They all know now that the bond has returned, and that it chose someone who didn't want power, someone who only wanted to serve. Kelly stepped closer. That is why it chose you, because you never asked for control, you offered trust. A soft pulse rippled across the ground. The temple responded to the code inside. Stone walls shifted, doors opened below the platform. A new chamber revealed itself, bright and clean, not ruined, not broken. Inside were cryopods, hundreds, some empty, some still active. Kelly stared at them, her voice low and full of wonder. These are my people. They survived, hidden by the architects, frozen until the bond returned. Kul walked beside her. He placed a hand on one of the pods. Inside was a young Nyari soldier, still asleep, still dreaming. They'll need time, but they'll whack. Kaylee looked at him. You gave them that time. You opened the last gate. Cal turned toward the sky. He pressed the communicator built into his arm. Morthus is Cal Renner, human engineer, carrier of the final bond to any ship receiving this. You don't have to fear what you don't control. You can choose to remember or choose to repeat the same mistake. She ended the signal. No response. Camabit, that didn't matter, because something else began. A ship descended through the clouds, not an enemy, not from the past. A small human scout vessel, old markings, damaged hull, but friendly. They had come not with weapons, but with questions. Cal looked at Kaylee. Can talk to them, they'll listen. Kelly didn't stop him. She only placed a hand on his wrist. And what if they ask you to come back? Kul smiled. Then I'll tell them I already did, just not the way they expect. Ted stepped toward the landing pad. The human vessel touched down. The door opened. A single officer stepped out, no weapon, no guard. Skull greeted him calmly, spoke of what he had seen, what he had become. Kelly watched from a distance. The wind moved around her, soft, almost peaceful. The officer listened, took notes, asked questions. Then he made a call, not to command, but to the Galaxite. Report that followed traveled farther than any warning ever sent. The bond had returned, and it had changed, not into a weapon, but into a memory that could not be erased. Some feared it, some hated it, but others camped from old colonies, from broken ships, from places forgotten by both sides. They came not to fight, but to witness. Kul stayed at the temple, not as a leader, not as a ruler. Stayed because he had a purpose, to teach what it meant to trust. Again Kelly stayed because her time as a protector had ended. Now she was something else. A partner, a voice, a beginning. Together they rebuilt not cities, but understanding. They became a symbol, not of strength but of choice, of kind of choice that begins with something small, a gesture, a look, a simple pat on the head. And from that one moment, the galaxy changed.